So which would you rather do? Eat something that causes disease, poverty, wars, and everybody dies? Or be pleased much more, healthy, wealthy, and wise? Well, that's the choice you make every time you take a bite. And that's not really my bag here. I mean, the main thing I'm trying to say is I'm kind of already past that and decided I'm trying to figure out how to make it easier for people to eat the right bite. But just let's review where we are. So if you eat animal flesh or milk, secretions, disease, poverty, wars, everybody dies. So leading causes of death, chronic disease, are essentially included in the animal diet. So what you have is all the you got the cardiovascular disease, you got cancer, you got liver problems, you got kidney failure, and all that kind of stuff. And of course, if you have those problems, you're going to have increased health costs, which contributes to poverty. And then you're going to have other problems associated with that, including there's problems with insurance. And before we get too much into that anyway, so we got so that contributes to poverty. And then there's, for meat, you got a lot more meat and dairy, you got a lot more resources used, a lot more competition for resources as a result, especially since the population is increasing and more people are trying to eat meat and dairy. So that creates competition for resources, including water and land and stuff like that. That leads to competition for those, which leads to all kinds of things, including wars, including concentration of power, corruption, the drain of finances, and then the wars and all that kind of stuff contributes. Then that takes away from the infrastructure, from education, from other natural, or from our national defense, including national security and food security included. So, okay, so that's not so cool. Then, of course, you got environmental destruction comes out of that too. You've got global warming. There's all kinds of destruction of property from floods and hurricanes and all that fun stuff, from freak weather situations. And then that, of course, requires that you have more energy to compensate for that. That you use more energy, and all this use of energy for the raising the animals and for refrigeration of the animals, they need a lot more, and all these other things we're talking about. Well, then you have even more energy to compensate for all this stuff, including you have pollution and things to deal with the pollution, and there's fracking for trying to get more energy, and that causes pollution. Then you have your water is messed up, then you have less water, and if you have less water, then you have back to you're more competition for the resource of water, and then you have more problems and more competition, more conflict, and more all that fun stuff. So that's just not so good. Then, of course, you need more pesticides, and you'll need, in some cases, well, why do you need more pesticides? Well, because a lot of the animals will eat grains, and the grains are raised, and then so they'll usually, in a large scale way, so you need pesticides, herbicides, and the antibiotics are used for the animals. And because there's so many antibiotics are used, you get the antibiotic-resistant bacteria, you get the antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and then you have more infections. And then there's also food poisoning. The main food poisoning you get is from animals, so you get Listeria and E. coli and Salmonella, and you get those on plants, but they come from animals. They don't just, generally speaking, you're not going to find them from plants alone typically. So they're the main causes of food poisoning. And then, of course, all this, there's a lot of problems here, and you know, it might get you kind of stressed out because you got no money, you're sick, you're dying, and everybody around you is dying, and you got wars and all that stuff, and there's the economy's going to hell, and because you had a concentration of power and corruption and all that stuff. So then you're going to be kind of like stressed out. So then you maybe end up, you know, into taking the psychopharmacological drugs, and that's a whole rat hole right there. So if you're going to eat, you can eat and get this stuff, or just eat plants and life's a lot simpler. These things get dramatically mitigated. One estimate. And there's all kinds of books if you want to read about this stuff. Here's just a few fun ones. You got China Study. Basically talks about the dietary aspects, and Healthy at 100. That's kind of talks about the longevity aspects of eating plants versus animals. You got your basic medical biochemistry. If you don't trust that you don't get enough protein and stuff like that, you'll see that you get pretty much a perfect amount of protein from plants. You gotta have a well-balanced diet within the plant diet, but other than that, and then there's more details if you want to read about kind of like things related to the heart of what life is in terms of the energy production and management, all that kind of stuff. Power, Sex, Suicide. I mean, that's an interesting title. This might make you want to read it. And I mentioned all the antibiotics. So there's these like antibiotic alternatives. Well, you have to start thinking about that if you're like getting all these bacteria that are antibiotic resistant. And then of course, if you trust the insurance industry for all this stuff, I would maybe you want to read this book. And then you get stressed out, and so this book you might want to have to read about that if you're get into the drug side of things. Well, anyway, so that's a whole bunch of, and then we got pollution. You got a book like this. Oops, that's the back cover. You got this book, and you got and this thing that kind of tells you about, okay, there's aquifers, and once you start polluting one place, it kind of spreads around. You really screw yourself. And then there's economic geography, which goes into, okay, you got resources, and that's a whole. You need to someone. This is like a lot of stuff, and then you got once you have the corruption and the power, you can say, okay, we're going to have like 99% Occupy, all that kind of stuff, and then you'll find out, if you don't already know, about the infiltration that happens over and over in history. This talks about that, and in terms of the kind of class struggle, middle class, you can read this book if you want to know like how was it. Oh, sorry, I mixed them up. This is the one. This is the one that talks about kind of the beginning of the middle class in UK and the United States. It started when a judge decided to uphold equal protection under the law, which is a counter to the concentration of power. If you want to rely on some judges being nice like that, good luck. And then that lasted for a pretty long time and did a pretty good thing, but for a lot of people. But then on the other hand, you got essentially, this book tells you, essentially, it chronicles many cases where there were social movements trying to, essentially they're popular movements, analogous to what we have with the Occupy movement, and it gets infiltrated, and so that kind of, there's a really uphill battle. I'm not saying you don't do it, but I'm just saying it's so much simpler rather than dealing with all that stuff. And then, of course, a lot of that ends up in litigation, and so you have this kind of thing if you want to kind of fight corporations. And I don't know, it seems a lot easier just to eat plants, because a lot of the problems you're trying to solve, all these things, kind of get dramatically reduced. Again, the China Study author has made an estimate. He's got research papers that he bases this on. I'm not going to claim that I'm going to. I'm sure you can have counter arguments about exactly the value, but it's definitely a dramatic difference you can make in diet in terms of fighting a disease. He was saying 90% of the diseases that people have in the United States could essentially be avoided by simply by diet. So I don't know about that, but I know personally I've switched about a year and 5 months ago, and it's been very impressive to me. And I've got stuff on the website you can look up on, for example, recipefactory.net. You can read all about that fun stuff. But okay, so now this is what I really want to talk about. So I want to increase the plant varieties in the diet. This is really the main purpose of this. But if I started talking about this, most people say, well, why do you want to do that? Well, I have the why on here. So aside from the mitigation, the animal versus plant thing, within plants you want more variety because actually better health, there's a balance of nutrition, anti-nutrients, toxins, and phytochemicals. So plants are a better choice. That a lot of them have, just like animals have things that are bad for you, they have some things that can be bad for you, but they generally are balanced with things that are good for you. If you just eat the same thing, like if you only ate, like there's some fairly well-watched video on the net of some vegan woman who eats nothing but fruit, and I think she has like nothing but bananas over and over and over and over again, and that's pretty impressive. She's not sick, but anyway, so generally speaking, you want a wider variety. It's better for, okay, so for health, I mentioned there's lower cost. Basically, diversification by itself can reduce it's a sort of a risk management thing, but also the plants can be better adapted to their particular local climate, pests, soil, and other plants. And then there's a culinary aspect, which I think is actually is maybe the most important in terms of practical effect for people to eat plants, because a lot of people who are not used to eating nothing but plants would say, I can't do that because animals, where am I going to get my protein? First they worry about that, and then maybe if you finally can convince them, okay, that's not really a problem, and that too much protein actually causes kidney damage, and that's one of the reasons why it's up there in the top 10 causes of death. So once you get past that thing, then it's like, well, I like the taste of this, and then some of it's just actually richness, and you can get all kinds of richness from plants because there's oil seeds and all kinds of sources of the fatty acids that you need for a culinary aesthetic, which is basically, again, you have a better chance of covering all this with a wider variety, including if you only are interested in what's local or what can grow locally. It's also, the variety is a stimulus, is a perceptual stimulation method, and then less, you get, another way to say it is less monotony, especially over the seasons. So now, okay, that's why. And the how, now we're really kind of getting to the core of what I think would be good to talk about here. So, determine safety, and this is kind of like, some of this is looking to the future, but a lot of this is right now. So, okay, so now you can determine safety, nutritional, medicinal potential, flavor, and other factors via modern analysis methods. And a lot of these are sort of expensive if you have one sample. Maybe if you're looking just for 140 nutrients, like you can get in the USDA reference nutritional database, you may get, it may cost you about $1,000, but that's one sample, and then you don't know what happens if you change the sample and use take another plant over. But anyway, but that's kind of gives you an idea. That is a method. There's historical native edibles, so it's like, okay, I know people have used to eat these things and they survive, so maybe it's we can do it too, and that's already that's how we have tomatoes and, well, actually that's not how we have tomatoes. That's how we have some other foods from that came from the Americas that the Europeans and other people end up having, like peppers and stuff like that. Anyway, but for some of those you don't know if it hasn't been eaten on a large scale. There's some things where there's toxins that can build up if you have too much of it in one time, and if you don't sort it with other things, and depending on how you prepare it, if you, like for example, even legumes, if you don't boil them, they have a number of different anti-nutrients and toxins and things that are bad for you. But if you boil them in water, then it's not so bad. It can actually be fine because it destroys those. There's modern biochemistry, biosynthesis pathways. Now this was the key, in my opinion, for the future of being able to include a much wider variety of plants in our diets, because it's a way to tell what are these other things, are the phytochemicals and the nutrients and flavor components and so forth are going to be present, and if there are genes that affect them, which can be modulated through methylation or basically the epigenetic components. This is, I think, going to help to mitigate the cost of the analysis, because this right now is kind of limited, it's expensive. The cost of doing this type of analysis keeps coming down, and there's free information that's online, so the databases are growing. There's a 1000 plants .org, I think it's called, or 1000 plant genome or something like that. There's a 1000 plant genome project that's trying to just create this database, put it online. There's a lot of things on there already. Most of the things that are on there already are the cultivated plants, but there will be more. So just the idea of being able to take advantage of that information for this purpose is it can be done now, and it's going to be a lot easier to do it in the future. So especially with some of the bioinformatics technologies being developed. Then you have statistical analysis applied to ever-growing free databases. So not only you have these databases I'm talking about, the biosynthesis pathways and related genomics and proteomics and all that kind of stuff, transcriptomics, you have from the USDA reference nutritional database, it already includes things like skunk cabbage and some, like different various weeds and things. Not enough, but it includes some. And a lot of times the nutrients are missing, so it's like, we need to fill in the blank there somehow. And so that's one of the reasons that I've been focusing on this, because the USDA reference database is it's the best in the world, but it's missing a lot for being able to actually expand the plant-based diet. So what am I talking about here? This is including, so for example, you can use the existing database, and in some cases the existing nutritional database, and extract to other plants. In some cases, for example, if you can use sort of a combination of genetic information and the taxonomy. So if for example, you have a grain and there's a neighbor grain, or if you have maybe a better example, so let's say you have buckwheat and there's curly dock. Curly dock is a weed, buckwheat is cultivated. You can look at certain ratios of things like that, and seeds like non-oil seeds, and you'll see certain max and min, like the distribution of protein as a percentage. The protein calories is a percentage of total calories. It tends to be relatively tight. If you look at the distribution of amino acids within the protein, the amount of amino acid you're going to get by weight for the amount of protein that you got by weight, that ratio tends to be fairly constant within a certain wide class of plants for a particular part, like for the seed. So you have a pretty good chance of being able to predict. There actually are there've already been some studies of curly dock, but if you look at things that haven't been studied yet, you can say, well, okay, it's in the same family or same variety, whatever. It's probably got within this range, and it may be close enough to make the analysis that you need to make. For example, this is back where I think it's most important. All this is useful for making sure that you're that you get something that's nutritious and it's not toxic or whatever. And this is kind of like a pre-filtered kind of thing, so it ends up in the store and people can buy it. But then what do you do with it? Or if you're going to buy something that in a restaurant or it's already prepared, if you don't like to cook, it's just an ingredient. Well, what can you do that tastes good with it? And so that's where the application of modern culinary arts and culinary science comes in. There's an awful lot in this area that's been going on. If you haven't seen the Harvard series on YouTube, there's a food science series. It's made for the general public. It's for the layman mostly. I think they have equation of the week. It's usually not too heavy an equation. And one of the lecturers was this guy, this Harold McGee. And this book, in terms of kind of closing the gap between science and the culinary arts, does a pretty good job. It's not like it's not a recipe book. It's not a cookbook, but it's good for people that are trying to put those two together. So then this course is a pretty good reference for the actual chemistry if you actually want to get more deeply into chemistry. But then when you're all done, you end up with recipes. Now, recipefactory.com is, or sorry, recipefactory.net is something that it has the application I put together, which is a prototype, and there you go. There's a high-tech way to show that one. And on there's an application where you can put in ingredients, including some of the native non-cultivated plants, and there's things like hemp seed, and which is becoming commercially available in the United States. Most of it's coming from Canada. Very nutritious, inherently fairly tasty. It's not like super tasty by itself, but you can do a lot of fancy things with it. And but you compare it to flaxseed oil, fish oil, stuff like that for the omegas. Check it out. Anyway, so recipefactory.net has an online application that gives you nutritional analysis, glycemic load, inflammation load, all kinds of things that will let you know about health effects. And what I'm hoping to do is use all these modern things in terms of oops, wrong one. Including especially the biosynthesis pathways in the statistical analysis. I've already used some to get a range for give me rules of thumb for how to do things if you don't have the full information, and also getting the full information for a number of things. There have been analysis of, for example, of weeds done by, ironically, it was an association for cattle or cows or something, bovine, I don't know, it was some American Association for bovine production or something like that. Anyway, the point of it was, okay, we're spending millions of dollars a year to get rid of all these weeds in the seed crop that we feed the cows. We're spending it on herbicides, and in other ways to eradicate the weeds. So what happens? Why don't we just look at what's in there? What if the cows just eat it? Because they do eat it if it's there. And so they looked at about 15 different weeds. Curly dock was one of them. They were looking at weed seeds particularly because the seeds tend to get in the grain that the cows eat. So when they did the analysis, they found that in terms of toxins, they didn't find anything particularly worrisome. And in terms of nutrition, generally speaking, all the seeds, all of the, well, I'd say the majority of them anyway, were clearly more nutritious, actually better for the cows, and they didn't require the extra fertilizer, the extra pesticides and stuff like that. So, in conclusion, every time you take a bite, you make a choice, choose between all that yucky stuff, and you can tell I have little kids, and this, which is like no sweat. And in the future, it should get easier and easier and easier to find a good choice that's not monotonous, it tastes great, is less expensive, and is local and easy, and including just weeds that grow naturally on your your land or in your neighborhood, and there's neighborhood foraging and stuff like that, which is a whole other topic. But okay, I hope that's been informative, and if not, if you have arguments, you don't believe some of this stuff, if you haven't been convinced, please feel free to read all these books and get back to me. Thank you.